Well, thank you very much. Welcome everybody to this conversation with Nicolo Rosso. We're really pleased to be here. So thanks to the Seven Foundation, and of course, most thanks to Photo Wings for being our partner in all of these talks, and thanks to all of you for coming to participate on this very important conversation. Those of you already putting down a hello and from where you're from, we appreciate it. Those of you who have not yet checked in, it would be great to hear from you and know where you guys are calling in from. I think this is obviously incredibly timely conversation. And I'm just going to read a little bit about Nico and his work, because what's really quite commendable to Nico is that he's been working on this project since 2018, long before it was an immediate headline, every minute, every moment story. Nico's been photographing and documenting migration across the Americas, photographing families across South and Central Americas that make the difficult journey north to the US in search of safety. And then by 2024, Nico reconnected with some in the United States and found that what they had imagined as the end of a dangerous journey had actually become a new cycle of fear and instability that we're all paying attention to, and certainly in the last few months from last year till now. In the summer of 2025, Nico spent nearly every day inside the immigration courts of downtown Manhattan, Federal Plaza, where ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents, were basically detaining numerous non-U.S. citizens attending court hearings. Many people had arrived under TPS, temporary protection status. They complied with the system, yet were still taken in the hallways even after judges had said that they were legal to stay. They were taken away by ICE, arrested, sent to distant detention centers, and placed on the path to deportation to either their home country or third nations. This is something we've all been paying attention to, and I know a number of you on this call have also been in the hallways of 26 Federal Plaza experiencing that as well. I think it's commendable the amount of time that Nico has spent there, and we'll be able to take a look at his work, not only from the US, but also what the people's journey that led up to the US. And we were just talking just before the call started kind of about this concept of how, this cliche version of this idea of the American dream, about people coming for the American dream. And for so many people, this dream has become an American tragedy, spoken in the words of Father Fabian, one of the protagonists that Nico spent a lot of time following. So we're going to start off with a short video, short film by Nico, and then we'll start talking about the work. Thanks, Nico. That's a very powerful series of images, which we're going to look at a number of them again and talk to Nico about that. So, welcome, Nico. I think starting out with the most obvious, but certainly kind of the necessary, is the original concept in 2017, 2018. How did how this? I mean, obviously, immigration has been a constant conversation, but not to the point where it is today. Certainly here in the United States. So, what brought you to this? What was the initial ideas behind it?
Thank you, Ron, and thank you to the Seven Foundation for having me today. I lived in Colombia until 2020, so around 2017, 2018, it was the beginning of my practice actually, and I started to document the influx of Venezuelan immigrants to Colombia, and I didn't know back then that eventually I would have traveled through Central America and other South American nations to follow them. People were fleeing a total collapse, a financial, social, political collapse in Venezuela. And they were coming into Colombia in search of work, safety, some in search of protection because they were persecuted by the Venezuelan government. But very shortly, I felt, and it was pretty evident, pretty clear that the conditions that they were fleeing from Venezuela were very similar in Colombia as well. And that's something that year by year, I've noticed all across Latin America. And I think it's a quality of the migration and people's movement across the continent. They live conditions that are impossible to bear, but it's very hard to find a better one. So I started to follow Venezuelans who were moving to Colombia, but then from Colombia, they were trying to find better places. So they went to Ecuador, and when Ecuador was failing them, they went to Peru, and then Bolivia, and then Chile or Argentina, Brazil. I met several families who had reached Chile on foot. And of course, these are distances that, like people walk during months, sometimes even years, like so a Venezuelan family who had left Venezuela after a few years was finding themselves in Chile, maybe with a Bolivian kid and a Peruvian kid on top of their other Venezuelan kids. And when even Chile was failing them, they were returning back to Colombia. And that's when people started to cross the Darien Gap. Like knowing that no country in South America would have offered them better conditions. So they started to cross the Darien Gap and move up north through Central America and Mexico and eventually in the United States. I was in Texas in 2021, and I remember the very moment when I realized that different stories that I were working on were actually part of one single story. I saw on the Rio Grande around 50 people crossing, and I was taking pictures, and I thought they were Central American, in particularly Honduran. In 2021, at that time, it was around June, July, I was on the road since 7 months, because at the beginning of the year, I had traveled to Honduras to document the aftermath of Hurricane Zeta and Iota, which destroyed parts of Honduras, San Pedro Sula in particular, and then also Guatemala. And I started to follow caravans of people. And most of the migrants I met during those months were Central Americans. But then that day in Texas, when people were approaching the riverside, I heard them speaking with a Venezuelan accent. And those were the same people, I mean, not the same people, but those were the same people that previously had crossed into Colombia, and that years before I was photographing coming into Colombia and then walking across the migration routes of Colombia. So in that very moment, I understood that that Colombia had failed them, and that the only way for them to find safety was to reach the United States. For some time, Chile was also one of the pole of this movement because of a stronger economy that eventually couldn't offer enough to families in search of a better future. So people were very enthusiastic and still following, like the American dream, having the certainty, like that in the United States, they would have put an end to their struggles. And this year in particular, we noticed that what they had imagined as, like the final step of their migration process was actually the beginning of a new, very dangerous one. And so in 2024, I was documenting families across the country thanks to the Alexia grant. People were working, people were getting a TPS. It was a fragile balance, but there was hope of a better future. And then the Trump administration took in, and we saw what happened in the courts of Manhattan. Actually, in 2024, when people were going to court, I was waiting for them outside because back then we didn't have access inside the courts. And that was this year in 2025, I think, thanks to Michael Nigro, who fought for us to be allowed documenting what was happening in public spaces within the federal buildings, that everything started. And I was in Italy at the beginning of June, and I was seeing David D. Delgado's from Reuters pictures of these arrests, and I knew I had to go back. So I thought I would have probably spent a few weeks in New York, as I normally do. And eventually I spent 7 months spending every weekday inside the court in the morning, and then trying to follow up with families and trying to document stories of family separations in all the 5 boroughs of New York. And now I see that from the courts of Manhattan, the fight is taking the streets. And I look forward to be back with you guys and continue to document these stories. What I think is that there is, everything starts with the language here. I mean, as you said, migration has long been one of the main topic, also for us photographers, it's one of the most urgent topic that we have to document. But increasingly, especially with the Trump administration, the language, the dehumanizing language, has been shifted to new levels of barbarism. And when you dehumanize people who are in search of safety, and you don't consider them equal as other citizens of the countries they are trying to seek asylum, then that opens the way and the path to abuse and violence, because if they are not humans anymore, then there's no limit to what you can do to them. And that's what we are witnessing, not just within the country, but also in an international scale. I think in recent years, the bar of what we are forced to accept, and unfortunately what we are also normalizing in the conflict, in international conflicts and within the countries, has been raised very, very high. There's a new level of access to war zone as well. In Gaza, you cannot enter. In Sudan, is extremely difficult. So there is a war against minorities. There is a rich world feeling that is financial stability is at risk, and then that's when fascism took him. And this and this war on minorities is also a war on journalists. We saw journalists being targeted in the streets. We saw journalists being targeted pushed on the floor within the courts in Manhattan, and documenting these arrests, the violence, the ICE agents masked with these, like fully armed with a bulletproof vest when it's not necessary. I started.
Nico, let me just stop you there. Nico,
Yeah.
let's start looking at some photographs, because there's a lot of different things that you've touched upon that we need to dive a little bit more into. But I want to accompany it with some of the work that you did. Actually, can we sort of start off actually with let's actually go to ICE right now, and then we'll go back to Exodus. Just to pick up on what Nico was talking about. So it is quite incredible, all the different things that this connects to, going from, simple people being arrested because their paperwork is incorrect because they didn't check the right box, and being deported, to kind of this concept of militarization of our society here in the United States, and so on. It's quite amazing how it all kind of comes together. And I think it does come together really well visually in your work, that a lot of what you're just talking about, you can see in the imagery. And I think that until basically, I think Chicago and then eventually Minnesota became more active in terms of being able to document ICE's activities, this hallway, or these two hallways on the 12th and 14th floor of 26 Federal Plaza, were the nexus of representation of the Trump administration activities with the, in their words, the illegal or undocumented people, and also the sense of cruelty that I think it's easy to say that we've seen throughout was always quite evident. And so I was wondering if we could just first kind of talk about the kind of this experience, because it's very unique. At least it was for me when I was working there, and I would assume for many of us, to be having such powerful and life-changing moments in a hallway, an office building. Basically that completely basic, completely normal office building, if these activities weren't happening. And kind of talk a little bit about your experience with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, like we were a group of photographers going almost every morning in these alleyways, and so we were meeting each other every day, but we were also meeting these men. We don't know their name, we don't know their faces, we know their eyes, and sometimes we name them by the color of their bandanas, because we don't know who they are. And like you and me, we discuss already a little bit, also like the fragile line and the ethics of talking with these people every day, like in documenting what they do, but in the same time being there with them, waiting for people to leave the waiting room, exiting the buildings, and waiting for arrest. And
actually, Nico, sorry, let me just stop you there for a second, because I think it's important. Even though we have a number of people on this call who were with us in the hallways, if you could explain for those that weren't, kind of exactly like the process of how this occurs, because I think the kind of absurdity and banality of what's going on in terms of, and then the result of what happens being so dramatic, is important to appreciate. So if you could kind of explain, these people arrive at 26 Federal Plaza, and kind of walk us through their experience and what you were able to document.
Well, asylum seekers have crossed the border illegally, we say, that's a civil offense to cross a border without papers. But in the same time, in international law, when you're fleeing war, persecution, that's a right. So you have the right to flee your country and search for safety somewhere else. So these people knew that they were committing a civil offense, and they were willing to give themselves up at the border at the wall, just after crossing the wall gaps, like in the southern border. They were willing to give themselves up to authorities because that's how you start your asylum process, So, and that happens in Europe as well, between Turkey and Greece. Like people come illegally and they say, we seek asylum, we are looking for asylum. Then authorities have the obligation to interview these people and understand whether they are fleeing from like political persecution, gang violence, general crime. And that's when the asylum process starts. So they are released. They were released with a temporary protection status, so they were granted protection. And then, like they wanted to do the right thing, so they were going inside the federal buildings to attend either the first or second or third hearings. So they didn't expect officer to be there waiting for them to arrest them because they were actually complying with the system. So they wanted to explain in front of a judge the reasons why they had left their countries. And and that's where the violence begins, because if people try to respect the law, but then the law doesn't apply anymore, then it's like losing an horizon, like it's like losing the path towards your goal, which is like being slowly integrated into a society where you want to work, send kids to school. And and there's a sort of, I would say, malice in this practice by the government and by ICE in particular, because oftentimes families, especially from Latin America, are families with a lot of kids, and as I told you before, I've seen so many families who had so many kids, and also of different nationalities, because they were born in different countries during their migration process. Therefore, there's always one parent who generally stay at home and takes care of the children while somebody else work. And most of the time, agents were detaining the father, and the father was the one who was working and providing for the family. So this is not just the drama of a family separation, but the drama is sustainability, survival, because if you take away from the family the only one who's providing for them, then you push these people deeper into poverty and deeper into vulnerability. In fact, many people decided to self-deport because it's not affordable to live in New York if you have to work and take care of the kids in the same time. And many families I have documented eventually decided to go back to either Ecuador, Colombia, or Venezuela, because there was no way for women left alone, or even father left alone, because sometimes the women are working and fathers are taking care of the kids. So this is a sort of, I would say, a sort of strategy, of course, they are trying to comply with figures. So I guess it's still 3,000 arrests per day. But in the same time, you can arrest thousands of people or hundreds of people every day. But to make it quicker, you make life so very impossible for them that you force them to live by themselves. And that's a way to make the process quicker and to expel families, not only from Latin America. We've seen a very specific targeting. Most of the time, homosexual, transgender were targeted. Black and brown people were targeted. very few times I've seen white people being targeted, but we have seen also that, either Russians, Ukrainians, Eastern Europeans. So, at the beginning, now we see them in line, like they are waiting. At some point, I believe it was August, the word spread. People started to understand that it was too risky to go physically inside a building. So through their lawyers or through pro bono lawyers, like provided by organization, by Father Fabian, and by like the network of activists and like citizens that are concerned about these situations, they started to demand online hearings, because through online hearings that would have been, of course, impossible to detain them, like also because these detentions are also like we've been talking a lot with lawyers inside the buildings, and like it's shady, like the legality of this arrest is never been confirmed by any lawyer, so they started to demand online hearings. Therefore, the government decided to get rid of the judges who were granting online hearings, and slowly they are getting rid of so many judges. Also in New York, I believe between September and November, it was more than a dozen judges fired, within the two buildings, 26 Federal and 290 Broadway. So I mean,
I think it's important. It's important to realize that these people, there's three options. They go, they take their chance. They're possibly able to get an online hearing, which would at least physically remove them from being arrested, or they miss their appointment and therefore then actually become really breaking the law. Because they've now not followed through with the procedure that they promised to do. So they're caught in this incredible, it's a horrible situation. And I mean, maybe you could refer to like maybe one of the moments that you remember, because so many times people who left their homes in the morning with their dogs waiting for them and their friends and family waiting for dinner and so on, expecting to go home, and they walk out of an office, because the courtrooms are actually like basically large offices, and they're gone and they're taken away and they disappear, and we don't actually even know what happens to them. Can you kind of maybe with her or some of the other people that you're
maybe Fiona, you can help us. There is a picture of Father Fabian and the family. They are all crying
outside, right?
26. Yeah, exactly. I think we were there together. So that story really sticked, because I think it's at the beginning of the slide, Fiona. Let's try to go there. You passed that? Go ahead. Here we go. So this is a Venezuelan family, if I'm not wrong, and this man was detained. All right, he was detained. Father Fabian tried to speak with the agent. Then he was trying to fight, as he always do, talking to them. Sometimes he goes to 290 Broadway, where there are also congressmen and women offices. Like Goldman has been helping Father Fabian fighting to release family many times. That time he couldn't do anything to release him, So the family, the woman and the kid, were waiting outside. We were there when I was with Father Fabian. We get closer to this woman, and Father Fabian just told her that he had been taken, and they were desperate. And at some point, the kid started to run and call his father, "Dad, Dad, Papi, Papi," and we don't know why, but they first detained him, and then he was released. And I talked with them. I stayed in touch with them. I wanted to go and meet them again, even that day. But such a day, like they went to court. They were already fearing that this could have happened. They still decided, like not to break the law, because then, as you said, you become a real target because you commit some illegality, like not presenting yourself to court. But that day they were living upstate New York, and they were working in some warehouse doing night shift, like to provide for the family. So in that day, after all the trauma, like that this experience had left, they actually had to run very fast back to upstate New York, because that night they went and worked the night shift, and then the day after and the day after, like, so it really feels like injustice never leave the migrant. Like they leave Venezuela, they go to Colombia, and they find violence. They go to another place, and there's the same pattern. Eventually, they arrive to the United States. They finally start to work. They can provide to the family. They can send the kids to school, but still the integration process is not even an integration process. It's almost an apartheid system, like, so we're also I think we need to talk about the fact that U.S. economy is based on exploitation, not just of resources, like in other countries, but also within the country, exploitation of the work of migrants, like who often pay taxes but don't receive the benefit of paying taxes. And that day, I couldn't stop thinking about this family, like leaving the kid alone at night in their apartment and going back to this warehouse, like working a 12-hour shift, paying less than what Americans would have been paid. So boosting the American economy, and in the same time being the target of a more and more totalitarian government.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think just kind of going back into kind of the workflow of working in this very again very tight, difficult environment. How was the relationship? Obviously, you mentioned Father Fabian many times. Like, how was it to be able to both document yet also um, partner in a way, because you have a like-minded idea of making sure you're raising awareness of what's going on, working with people like him and other activists slash nonprofits in this situation.
If Father Fabian is a light in this darkness. He really is. He really helps hundreds and hundreds of families every day. Sometimes he forgets their name. He receives calls all the time. He was able to, like, find resources to bail people out when that was possible, and he really fights the fight, calmly, like without shouting, like always straight, steady, like, and people call him Padre, and he really is, and I connected with him, I think, the first week at 26 Federal, like when I met him and I saw him, like I really wanted to understand better and deeper what he was doing, but I also felt stronger. Every time I'm around him, I feel stronger. There is a network of people working hard. There is a friend of mine, Charlotte, and she's amazing. She works for an organization in Manhattan. They have psychologists, they have pro bono lawyers. Of course, the lawyers are the hardest to find because they are packed with the requests as well as psychologists. But every time I could start following and getting closer with families who had been separated, she was helping me finding a psychologist. Sometimes she was helping me finding somebody who could provide food, at least something, or some money, like with some regularity, like to some families, and so meeting this kind of people really committed, like that made me feel stronger, and made me feel that also through my work I could sort of contribute, like to the fight that they are fighting. It was much harder with activists, that inside the buildings, and I understand why most of them dislike us, like because media. I mean, the media have been sinking since before I started this profession. We see the headlines when it's about Gaza. We see the headlines when it's about Sudan, and also when it's been about these arrests and the documentation of ICE practices, either on the street or inside the buildings. Media have been focused on action. They rarely have been committed to document people who really bear the real cost. I've been fighting hard to get family stories published, and therefore I understand why activists fight with us. But for me, at the beginning, that was unbelievable, because everywhere in every country, either in Africa or in Latin America or in the Middle East, I've always worked with activists. They are my allies, and I'm their friend. Organization, activists, citizens. Those are the people who always helped me getting access. And in New York, the scenario was different. I found myself with activists yelling at us, and I was like, why they are yelling at us? And then, of course, I realized because they know the media, and media are not doing a very good work. And when we focus too much on action because it's more sexy, we have to be very careful if we don't counter that with family stories and with what happened afterwards, because that action is what also fueling the narrative and the language of violence, of the tough guys, MAGA people, they're happy to see those images, as, neo-Nazi might be happy when they see, I don't know, Mark Peterson picture on, I know many hate him, but, these people, they love to see the violence perpetrated against those minorities, because they feel superior. So if we just focus our narrative on that violence, well, that's the narrative that they are also using, because they are keeping the promises, they're being tough, nobody's entering here, and we're sending them back. So we have to be very, very, very careful with that. And that's why I try to focus so much on family stories and the trauma of family separation. And thanks to Father Fabian, thanks to Charlotte, and also the therapists that have been helping those families. I'm glad that I have learned so many things about family trauma and what it means to be added, in a process that is already difficult, a new level of distress. These children, there is another picture. I don't know if Fiona could pick that. There is a girl doing the butterfly technique. Maite. That's a family I've been following for a long time. They were doing online Zoom sessions with the therapist, and I remember the therapist trying to understand, the level of trauma and also the kind of trauma. And I was surprised from what Maite was. Maite is a 10 years old girl. Her biological father was killed in Ecuador. Her mother boyfriend was there, separated at the 26th Federal Building. So her father was killed. The mother eventually met a new man. They decided to leave also because it was killed by gangs. in Ecuador, you know. So to make sure the family was safe, they left, you know, and they arrived to the US. So this little girl was extremely smart, extremely kind, extremely wise as well, you know, like she was talking to the therapist, and the therapist was asking them which kind of fears she has, you know, like, or if she was feeling sort of responsible for what had happened to her father, which is not the biological father. And she was so wise, so clear in her statements, you know, like, and she was saying like, no, I know it's not my fault. They arrested him because we are migrants, you know, but you know, like that in the same time, you know, like she got it right, you know, because it's nobody's fault. It's a system that is unjust, you know, and that it's targeting the minority that is exploiting in the same time. But she was so clear. But then she was also saying to the therapist that every time those memory come back, she feels unsafe, and she feels that the world is not a safe place. But Ron, I mean, I think we feel the same, right? The world is not a safe place. And so the
No.
therapist, through the butterfly technique, was sort of working with her, you know, like recalling those painful memories, and through guidance, connecting them to other nicer memories, you know. So from the memory of the trauma, the therapist was, you know, like driving her and her mother, who was around listening, also to other memories, you know, like, and eventually at the end of the therapies, we were laughing because they were remembering funny things of one moment they went to the beach all together, you know, and you know, like, so doing this work, you know, like, I see the violence and the ignorance, the shallowness, you know, like of these officers, you know, like unfit, not scholarized, you know, like wanna be tough, you know, like wanna play, you know, like wanna play war games, and on the other side, I see these families that, despite all the violence and the trauma that has been inflicted to them, are still able to shine, to laugh, to love each other, and to be wise, you know. And so, you know, like, for me, that's you know, that this is the reason why I do this work, you know, because this connection that sometimes we can establish with the people we photograph, you know, that's a memory that I'm creating for, also for me, for myself, for my life, you know. And uh, I myself often think that too often I feel that the world is too unsafe for everybody, you know, and too dangerous. But then, thanks to the family I photograph, I can also connect those memory to how pressure, you know, the love they have, and their willingness to open the door and to let me work, and so that's also, that has become my way to overcome also my own traumas, you know, like, because I mean, it's obvious that, you know, like, we do this work, you do this work since decades. I don't know how you can still stand, you know, with all the wars and the tragedies that you have been documented. But I really think that, you know, this is how we fight this fight, you know, like, strengthening the connection of good, you know, like, strengthening the collaboration that we can have with Father Fabian, with this organization and with these families. You know, there is another family who got so passionate about photography that eventually they asked me if I could get them a camera, because they wanted to start photographing themselves. And that was Christina who got me a camera so I could give them a camera, and now they're photographing themselves, you know, like, and I think that, you know, like, we fight this fight with light, you know, like, we fight this darkness with strengthening this the beauty, that we can still find.
Well, thanks, Nico. I really appreciate your honesty and sharing those feelings, and just kind of one more kind of step into a little bit more of a personal understanding. I was wondering, this is kind of combined but separate. I mean, one, you're obviously not American, and you're working around people that are, looking for, not necessarily people like you, but certainly people like you have disappeared. So I'm wondering, like, how much of that is a fear when you're standing among people that basically could take you away for whatever particular reason. And
Well,
then also just kind of just adding to that, something of I understand the necessity of balancing violence with the other pictures that are as important and so on. Quite often we are also focused just on those immediate arrests and so on. But at the same time, do you feel that we are, at least in the short term, not you specifically, but all of us, contributing to the narrative that is helping people or bringing fear to people to self-deport, which is one of the reasons why we've been allowed to work in that particular situation for so long?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, we are. Like these days, I'm receiving messages from, I don't know why, all in the same time, but there are families that either I met or I have followed, and they are texting me, "Hey, there's my brother. He wants to come in. He wants to go to Miami. What do you think? Are they gonna do what they do in the courthouses, also in the airports?" What can I say? I don't know, but yeah, I think we do. I think I do. And often I wonder, why are they letting us doing this? And I don't know why. Maybe it's because thanks to Michael, and the lawyers, we could get in, and get the law at least respected in having journalists doing their work in corridors that are public spaces. But of course, I also wonder, we are documenting violence, we are documenting fear in the eyes of people being detained or separated. Like this, I mean, this is going to be seen, but that's why it's important that we show them Father Fabian's work, the church's work, and and that we document also stories of reunification, because there has been a few, there have been a few stories of reunification. And regarding your first question, well, it happened that there are agents. I got to I happened to become pretty close to, you know there are ICE agents, CBP agents enforcing ICE operation within the buildings. We saw each other for 7 months, and even, like when my work was getting, what was getting to become, like a, a piece of work, a body of work, and I started to work on detailed captions and text and stuff. I even shared, with those agents, with whom I have a sort of dialogue with. And I don't know if you were there when one of our colleagues were pushed from the elevators. Maybe Fiona, you can help us with that. There are a couple of pictures of our colleague from Anadolu agency on the floor with Commander Welsh and doctors around him. The day after this accident, it was clear that the agents were looking for somebody to arrest. And of course, I was concerned that day because I was like, hey, I mean, I have a regular visa, I've been working in the country many times. When I apply, I have magazines and clients writing letter of recommendation, but I'm an Italian guy working in the US on migration. And so I talked to one of these guys, officers, and I was like, hey, is there anything happening to me these days or not? Because I see you guys want to make an arrest. And this guy was 100%, Nico, we want to make an arrest, but you're not the one on the list. That's what he told me. And apparently they meant to target those of us who reply more harshly to them, you know. And I don't know if you want to bring up, the conversation we already had a few days ago about ethics, about us talking to them. Like sometimes I had even activists yelling at me, like, you talk to this guy, you're like them. And, like a couple of weeks ago, I went to the theater with my mom and we went to see Norimberga, the movie. It's interesting to see how these American psychiatrists got to know Goering, like Goering, the
trials.
Yeah. And actually, Goering was calling him my friend, and of course they were not friends. But I think even for the work we do, especially when we live in a time and space where dehumanizing people has become normalized, I think that's another way to fight the fight. Because if I dehumanize those agents, I'm not gonna get anything out of that. So I never tried to play with them. I never faked, right? Never. But I tried to engage in a dialogue and I tried to find sort of shared places where I could, get a sort of even personal dialogue, and uh, and uh, and that allowed me to understand that, for example, many of them didn't want to do that. And the banality of evil. Some of them were like, I didn't sign for this, but it was either choosing where I can get, when I can get my holidays, therefore signing for this, because, they rotate, they have not enough ACE agents, even if now they are hiring the thousands and the thousands, and anybody basically can get into ICE, But they were rotating people from other agencies because they needed personnel, So when I was talking to these guys and waiting for the arrest, some of them were like, I didn't sign for this, I just wanted to choose when to go on holiday. Or people from ATF, because these people do real investigations. I mean, not on tobacco, but firearms, of course. Or even FBI, these people do real investigations, but even in terms of budget, the Trump administration now has been cutting $500 million to FBI, almost $500 million to ATF. And instead they have been giving dozens and dozens of billions of dollars to ICE, but ICE don't do investigation. They do deportation and detentions, So even those agents, when they got to, when they understood that I was there doing my job and that I would have not fought them, at least not that way. I want to fight them, I want to fight them very much, and I can say that I'm their enemy, I'm not their friend, but in the same time, I want to get to know who these people are. And as much as the more I knew about them, the more I understood the banality of that, anybody could do that. Anybody could do that, as just as we all are normalizing the genocide in Gaza, that's also something very important that we have to understand. If we don't stand up for genocide, do you think we're going to stand up for democracy? Do you think we are going to stand up for a minority migrants in the United States? We are not doing that. We need to raise the bar of what we're willing to fight for and the way we're willing to fight for. That means also fight with our clients, Why do you want to publish only action pictures? No, you need to publish the trauma of these people. Otherwise, you are playing their game. Plus, it's very hypocritical, because you fake that you are fighting them, but eventually you are fueling the same narrative, And there was one agent, one of those mountains, he arrived lately in later months. I think it was November, December. This guy really disliked me. He hates me, right? And a few times he came very, very close to me, looking at me with a very, angry face, with the fist, almost, showing me that he was about to punch me, And those were moments I almost felt a little bit of fear. But then I was like, also, well, I dare you, because I'm gonna fight back anyway. I mean, not there, not physically. And one of the agents I built a dialogue with called this guy and told him, you need to leave Nico alone, So, it's, of course it's complicated, but, we discuss where's the ethical line, if we establish such a dialogue with the people we are trying to denounce, okay? But I don't see an ethic problem over there. I see more an ethic problem when, and those who are there know, because I yell when I normally yell at them when I see that, but I think when we blur the ethical lines, when we are there to document something that must be recorded, but if a family or a woman with her kids is leaving the court, is leaving the waiting room, and they ask, please do not take pictures, then we don't take pictures, because we are documenting dozens and dozens of arrests. We don't need that one very much, we can tell the story otherwise. And documenting migration, I work a lot with UNHCR, with the humanitarian organization, the United Nations, and I've been, sometimes it's painful, it's difficult, but I've been trained about that, because it's documenting migration is always hovering between the need to record what's going on, because we must create a memory of something that is happening and that we cannot forget, and that will serve the historical memory. But in the same time, we need to protect people's privacies, and also people will, So when I saw, and unfortunately too often, colleagues shooting when people ask not to do that, I confronted them. I started meeting Stanley Greene, who more than 10 years ago, one of the first things he told me was, in this profession, humanity is lacking. My colleagues are lacking humanity. And I was like, what? Because for me, starting photography was about that, contributing to this. And he also told you cannot do this for more than 10 years, but here we are, But I see what he was saying back then.
Thank you, Nico. We have about 10 minutes left or so, so we're going to open it up to questions. So please, for those of you that have put in a question, please feel free. And Nico, can you see the question, or do I need to read it?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Naomi. How do they like to be depicted? Well, unfortunately, we don't study how to read and write photography at school. So sometimes it's also very difficult to understand how we like to be depicted, Many people ask me to send pictures of them in the hallways, Some were living all together, the family all together, so it was easier. Others didn't, but they still wanted to see the pictures. There is a family in Long Island that I followed and met a few times. This is such a tragic story, because so there are 5 kids. three fathers, one left alive. One died, one abandoned, and one is there. It's the father of the two younger kids. And they are all illegal. They all crossed illegally. They all work and provide for the family. The woman was detained during an ICE check-in, because also for the people who listen to us, like you have the ICE check-in, which is when you already went through the hearings and you just have, like to show yourself to the agents every once in a while. But now they started to detain people also during check-ins, and then we have, like the hearings, the court hearings. So this woman was detained and still is, and their daughter calls her every day and promises her that when she'll be back, they will have a beautiful house with a swimming pool, that she will buy her a Gucci bag and get the best haircut, as if, like promising her mother all these beautiful things would, like fasten the process to have her back. And in that case, also talking with their lawyer, they were too concerned to show their faces. The grandfathers, the grandparents who are now taking care of the five kids, and the father of them, because they are legal and they fear that they could be targeted, and they cannot lose any other family member, because now the grandmother is not working anymore because she has to take care of the kids. So it's like a financial struggle, a family struggle, like. And sometimes I feel like, how hard can this be for us? But can you imagine, like, even if we try to imagine what this means for these families? I mean, people are strong, especially when they love each other, because the difference between the perpetrators and the victim here is that the victims are full of love and the perpetrators are ignorant, who know nothing but hate and bigotry. So the strength of these people, it's what will allow them to overcome the trauma, while the bigotry and the ignorance and the violence will keep those other people in a circle of banality, and they will never get to know who they really are in their lifetime. Like, and that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you. Fiona, next question. Great.
Well, I started to work with M. I work with Leica since a few years now, because Leica has been helping me quite a bit. And when more and more photographers started to pack over there, and it became more difficult to work, I decided to make my life over there even more difficult, and I switched to M. So most of the work has been done with Leica monochrome, and I only use 35 millimeters, one camera, one lens. But like making it more difficult, it's Philip Blankensop, our common friend. He always tells me, Nico, make your life as difficult as you can. I mean, photographically, because then when you can get something you couldn't expect, So, of course, I missed a lot of pictures at the beginning, but then, also, that's another ethical line, like, I don't know if working with two cameras at 15 millimeters, doing 60 frames per second, and then cropping, I don't even know if that's photography anymore, So I decided to make it more difficult and do manual, like manual focus, everything manual. And my shutter speed is my finger, so making it more difficult, I really need to be focused with it, very focused. And that, well, then I don't know. I mean, you guys tell me, I'm never very satisfied with my work, but I sense that working this way is, helping me growing anyway. Oh yeah, big time credential. Yeah, yeah. That's the only thing that can get you kicked out from the building, not having a press pass. Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be a specific press pass. They
No,
want
anyone.
something that identifies you as press. So it's not that difficult to actually show up with a credential. Yeah.
No. Well, I mean, when they get to know who you are and you're honest with them, then you might be lucky. But for me, the connection with the family is straight with the families, because if you then are bonded with the family, there's nothing they can do, yeah. But I understand activists, I really understand. I'm with them, I hate what they hate. It's just painful for me when they fight with me because, of course, in those front lines, I have no time to explain who I am, why I'm with them, and that they should not be angry with me. But I understand them very well, very well. Like New York Times headlines regarding Gaza. I mean, and they got a Pulitzer Prize a couple of years ago. Come on, I mean, and all of our colleagues still want to work with them. I understand we have to pay rent and bills and whatever, but at least we need to be aware that these people are not honest. That's not the truth anymore. That myth has to be destroyed. That's why I prefer to work on my own, and then I publish with the clients who want to do that, the feature that I pitch them, So at least I'm sure that if they publish something, the root of that and the will at the root of that is true and honest, because I fear the way information is manipulated. And, this system is favoring billionaires, private contractors, but the media, the big media, are part of that system, so there is a system of private contractors building mega prisons, and they are getting a lot of money from the government. These are billionaires building more facilities, getting more money from your tax money and also mine, because when I get prices and grants in the US, they tax them over there. Go figure. So it's also my money going there, and who God knows where. And like those private contractors are the same one profiting from the genocide in Gaza, from the wars everywhere, with surveillance systems, with mega prisons, detention centers, and so on. And those are the same companies over there in Gaza and here in the United States. Think about Palantir. That's what we should be focusing on. That's the real fight. I know that it's a very dangerous fight, but we need to understand also that the big media are big corporation, and they have to deal with the government. Like Trump is also threatening them. He sues them. He sues them as Donald Trump. And then he threatens them as the president of the United States. And these people pay millions, and these men get richer and richer, and we play the game along with him. So, okay, you get the assignment with New York Times, good for you, but at least be aware of what this is about,
All right. Well, thank you, Nico. Thank you very much. Is there anything that you wanted to alert the audience about? Your next workshop, your next book, your next show?
Thank you. No, book, unfortunately, not yet, because as so much is going on that that I want to keep working before working on a book. But Fabio Bucciarelli and I, with Valentino Bellini, who is the colorist, he takes care of my archive, the post-production. The three of us, we will do a workshop, a masterclass. I guess it will be 3 days in Torino in May. Shortly, we will announce that, and of course, it's going to be easier for the Europeans to come here. But if there's anybody in the US that wants to visit us in Italy, you'll be welcome. And I have a talk at the Leica store and gallery in Torino, close to where I live, the first week of March. We still have to define the date because there is currently an exhibition of my work on Chad, documenting the Sudan's conflict from the periphery of the border at the gallery. So there will be a talk over there. For those who are in Torino, you're welcome, and we'll be announcing that on Instagram and LinkedIn, I guess. And thank you.
Nico.
I mean, thank you so much, Ron. Thank you, Seven. I mean, it's not the first time that you allow me to share my work through Seven. I really appreciate it, and so thank you so much for your support. And I look forward to teaming up again, either in Minneapolis or whether
Somewhere.
we have to, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you again to Photo Wings. I encourage you all to go to photowings.org to look at the content they have. They have some amazing interviews with almost all the working photographers of today and from yesterday. Really incredible information and inspiration. Please follow the Seven Foundation. And those of you that are interested, the Foundry applications are closing on February 15th. Please go to the site to apply for the Foundry workshop. As everything at Seven Foundation is free of charge. And thank you, Fiona, for your production on this project today. And we look forward to seeing all of you in the next talk. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Fiona.